Where does our modern understanding of Satan come from? The origins of Satan, as detailed in the Bible and developed through Jewish apocalyptic literature, reflect a gradual transition from an obedient servant of God to an autonomous antagonist. By the time of early Christianity, Satan had become the embodiment of evil in opposition to God's will. His narrative enriched by influences from Persian dualism, Greek philosophy, and Roman socio-political realities. This transformation underscores Satan's role as a dynamic and evolving figure, mirroring humanity's struggle to understand the nature of evil and its place in the cosmos. In the Bible, Satan is not an independent or inherently evil being, but a divine functionary within the heavenly court. The term Satan is used generically to describe an adversary or accuser, whether human or spiritual. Satan's role at this stage is to test, challenge, or obstruct, acting in alignment with God's will rather than in opposition to it. Examples include the book of Job, where Satan is mythologically and contextually presented as one of the sons of God attending the divine council. He acts as a prosecutor, questioning Job's piety and suggesting that Job's faithfulness is contingent on his material blessings. God grants Satan permission to test Job, demonstrating that Satan operates under divine authority, not as a rebel. Another example is found in Zechariah 3, 1 and 2, where Satan is depicted as an accuser standing before the chief angel of the Lord, opposing Joshua the high priest. This narrative underscores Satan's role as a legal adversary rather than an embodiment of cosmic evil. There is also Numbers 22 to 35, where the term Satan appears as a common noun, describing the angel who obstructs Balaam's path. Here, the Satan is clearly a servant of God, further emphasizing the absence of a malevolent, autonomous force. These portrayals reflect the early Hebrew worldview, which lacked the dualistic opposition between good and evil seen in later theological developments. The Babylonian exile marked a turning point in Jewish thought, exposing the Israelites to Zoroastrian dualism. This interaction profoundly influenced Jewish apocalyptic literature, contributing to a shift in Satan's role from divine prosecutor to cosmic adversary. Texts such as 1st Enoch and Jubilees reflect the growing influence of dualism, preventing a stark division between good and evil. Satan begins to take on characteristics of Ahriman, the Zoroastrian spirit of darkness and chaos. These works introduce the idea of fallen angels who rebel against God, led by figures like Azazel and Shemhaza, setting the stage for Satan's later role as a leader of demonic forces. The Qumran community also plays a part in the development of the Satan character. The Essenes, a sectarian group responsible for the Dead Sea Scrolls, contributed to the development of satanic imagery. Their writings describe a cosmic battle between the Prince of Light and the Prince of Darkness, with Satan often associated with the latter. This ethical dualism underscored humanity's role in choosing sides in the spiritual conflict. In the rabbinic Aggadah, Satan is further personified as the tempter, accuser, and bringer of death. He becomes associated with the serpent in Eden and the angel of death, though these roles remain under God's ultimate control. Despite these developments, Satan's independence from God is limited, reflecting a monotheistic framework that resists the full-fledged dualism seen in other religious traditions. Early Christian theology inherited and transformed Jewish conceptions of Satan, emphasizing his role as the ultimate enemy of Christ and the Church. The New Testament provides key developments in the narrative of Satan, the first found within the Gospels. Satan plays a prominent role in the wilderness temptation, offering Jesus worldly power in exchange for worship. This scene establishes Satan as the ruler of a corrupt earthly kingdom and a direct adversary of God's plan for salvation. Jesus also frequently encounters demonic forces, casting them out and asserting his authority over Satan's realm. These acts symbolize the impending defeat of Satan's power through Christ's mission. In Pauline theology, Paul identifies Satan as the god of this world who blinds unbelievers and opposes the gospel. He describes a spiritual war between believers and demonic forces, emphasizing the need for divine armor. Satan is seen as the instigator of sin and corruption, working through both individuals and societal structures. The Revelation presents a dramatic vision of Satan as the dragon, the serpent of old, and the accuser of humanity. This apocalyptic imagery reinforces the idea of a cosmic battle culminating in Satan's ultimate defeat and eternal punishment. Early Christianity synthesized Jewish monotheism with Hellenistic philosophical concepts, further shaping the image of Satan. The key influences included within this synthesis are Platonism, Gnosticism, with the Roman imperial context further shaping the landscape. Platonic dualism, which contrasts the spiritual realm with the material world, reinforced the association of Satan with flesh, sin, and corruption. Concerning Gnosticism, early Christian writers often rejected Gnostic interpretations of Satan, which portrayed him as the demiurge, a flawed creator god. Orthodox Christianity maintained that Satan was a created being, subordinate to God, despite his rebellion. As for the Roman imperial context under Roman persecution, Christians increasingly viewed the empire as an extension of Satan's kingdom, with martyrdom framed as a confrontation between the forces of Christ and the powers of evil. The image and role of Satan underwent significant development in early Christian thought, evolving from his depiction in Jewish tradition as an adversary or agent of God to a full-fledged antagonist opposing divine will. This development was shaped by Jewish apocalyptic traditions, which introduced dualistic themes and emphasized Satan's role as an adversary, Greco-Roman influences, including Platonic dualism and the pervasive concept of spiritual conflict, Christian theological debates, which sought to define Satan's relationship to God, humanity, and salvation. By the end of the 3rd century, Satan had become firmly placed within Christian theology as the personification of evil and the leader of demonic forces, setting the stage for further elaboration in the Middle Ages and beyond. The New Testament marks a pivotal shift in the understanding of Satan, presenting him as a cosmic adversary who directly opposes God, Christ, and the Church. While drawing from Jewish traditions, the New Testament amplifies Satan's role in a way that foreshadows later theological developments. In Matthew 4, 1-11, and Luke 4, 1-13, Satan tempts Jesus in the wilderness, offering him dominion over the world in exchange for worship. This narrative establishes Satan as the prince of the world, wielding significant, though ultimately subordinate, power over the earthly realm. His failure to corrupt Christ symbolizes the superiority of divine authority over satanic deceit. The Gospels portray Jesus as a healer and exorcist, casting out demons and confronting satanic forces. In Mark 3, 22-30, Jesus identifies his mission as a battle against the strong man whom he binds and overcomes. This motif reinforces Satan's role as the leader of demonic forces, but emphasizes that his defeat is imminent. There is also the illustration of a cosmic battle in the Revelation, where the Revelation provides one of the most vivid depictions of Satan, identifying him as the dragon, the serpent of old, the accuser, and the instigator of rebellion in heaven. This apocalyptic imagery reflects a dualistic worldview. portraying Satan as the ruler of the present age who will ultimately be defeated and cast into the lake of fire. In Pauline theology, Paul characterizes Satan as the god of this world, who blinds the minds of unbelievers and seeks to thwart the spread of the gospel. In Ephesians 6:12, Paul warns that Christians are engaged in a spiritual battle against dark rulers, authorities, powers of this world. Paul also links Satan to sin and temptation, describing him as an active force working to corrupt individuals and oppose the church. The writings of the Apostolic Fathers who succeeded the New Testament authors reflect an expanding theological understanding of Satan. They integrate the New Testament's depiction of Satan with emerging ecclesiastical concerns and apocalyptic expectations. Concerning Ignatius of Antioch, Ignatius refers to Satan as the ruler of this age, a designation emphasizing his dominion over the fallen world. Ignatius situates Satan at the heart of Christian struggles, portraying him as the instigator of heresy and schism within the church. For Ignatius, the unity of the Christian community under the bishop is the primary defense against Satan's divisive tactics. In the Epistle of Barnabas, Barnabas introduces a dualistic framework describing two opposing paths, the way of light and the way of darkness. Satan, as the prince of the present age of lawlessness, leads the forces of darkness in their opposition to Christ and the church. Barnabas' depiction of Satan reflects the influence of Jewish apocalyptic dualism and the emerging Christian view of a cosmic battle. As for Justin Martyr, Justin identifies Satan as a fallen angel who rebelled against God and deceived humanity through idolatry and false religions. He emphasizes Satan's role in persecuting Christians, suggesting that Roman paganism is a manifestation of satanic influence. For Justin, the ultimate victory of Christ over Satan is central to the Christian hope. As Christian theology became more systematic, early church fathers developed complex doctrines regarding Satan's nature, origins, and role in human history. They sought to reconcile the existence of Satan with monotheism, divine omnipotence, and human free will. Irenaeus of Lyons framed Satan's rebellion as a moral and metaphysical fall. Satan's pride and envy led him to reject God's sovereignty, and he became the deceiver of humanity. Irenaeus emphasized that Satan's power was limited and ultimately subordinate to God's will. He also linked Satan's role to the concept of human redemption, arguing that Christ's victory over Satan restores humanity to its original state of communion with God. Origen of Alexandria provided a sophisticated analysis of Satan's role within God's providence. He viewed Satan as a necessary antagonist who tests and refines human virtue. Origen also speculated about the possibility of Satan's eventual repentance and restoration, reflecting his broader belief in universal salvation. This idea, however, was controversial and later condemned as heretical. Tertullian described Satan as the primary adversary of the church, working through heretics, pagans, and persecutors. He links Satan to moral corruption, portraying him as the instigator of sin and the corrupter of human souls. Tertullian's writings emphasize the necessity of spiritual vigilance and discipline to resist Satan's influence. It is from all of these combined ideas that our modern superstition of Satan arises. The early Christian conception of Satan also reflected the socio-political context of the Roman Empire. Christians viewed persecution and martyrdom as manifestations of Satan's enmity against Christ and his followers. The empire itself was often seen as an extension of Satan's kingdom, a force of opposition and idolatry. Martyrdom became a symbolic victory over Satan, demonstrating the triumph of faith over worldly power. The development of Satan's identity as a central figure in Christian theology involved the process of refinement by early church fathers. These theologians wrestled with questions about Satan's origin, nature, role in cosmic and human affairs, and ultimate fate. Drawing on biblical texts, Jewish apocalyptic literature, and Hellenistic philosophy, they sought to reconcile the existence of Satan with Christian monotheism and the nature of a good and omnipotent God. One of the central challenges for early Christian theologians was to explain Satan's origin and his role in the divine order. The prevailing view that emerged identified Satan as a fallen angel, a being created good by God but corrupted by his own will. This narrative allowed theologians to maintain the goodness of God while accounting for the existence of evil. Irenaeus of Lyons emphasized that Satan's fall was rooted in pride and envy. He argued that Satan, jealous of humanity's special relationship with God, rebelled against divine authority. For Irenaeus, Satan's actions were a distortion of his original purpose as a servant of God. In Against Heresies, Irenaeus identifies Satan's rebellion as a moral lapse rather than a flaw in God's creation. This approach reinforced the concept of free will, both for angels and humans, as the basis for moral responsibility. Tertullian expanded on the idea of Satan's fall by linking it to human sin. He argued that Satan's envy and pride led him to deceive humanity, particularly through the temptation of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. This act of deception was central to Satan's role as the corrupter of human beings. Tertullian also introduced the idea that Satan continues to exert his influence through heresy, false religions, and moral corruption. His writings framed Satan as a pervasive and active force in both individual lives and societal structures. Again, this is where our traditional perspective of Satan comes from. Theologians also sought to define the extent of Satan's power and influence in the cosmos. While they affirmed that Satan was subordinate to God, they acknowledged his significant role as the prince of the world, who wielded power over those who rejected divine grace. Origen of Alexandria offered one of the most detailed and speculative accounts of Satan's role in Christian theology. He described Satan as a created being who fell from his high position due to pride and a misuse of free will. Satan, along with other fallen angels, retained significant powers which they used to tempt and corrupt humanity. Origen emphasized that Satan's power was not absolute and was ultimately permitted by God for the testing and refinement of human souls. This idea reflected Origen's broader understanding of theodicy, which saw suffering and evil as opportunities for spiritual growth. Origen had a unique and controversial theology: the eventual restoration of all beings, including Satan, to a state of harmony with God. While this view was later deemed heretical, it highlighted Origen's belief in the redemptive power of God's love and justice. Cyprian of Carthage focused on Satan's role as the primary adversary of the church. He viewed persecution and heresy as manifestations of Satan's effort to undermine the Christian community. For Cyprian, the unity and discipline of the church were essential defenses against Satan's attacks. Another critical area of theological exploration was Satan's relationship with humanity. Theologians debated the extent to which Satan could influence human thoughts, actions, and destiny, seeking to balance his role as a tempter with the Christian doctrine of free will. Lactantius portrayed Satan as the deceiver and corrupter of humanity. He argued that Satan worked through idols, false gods, and pagan religions to lead people astray. This interpretation linked Satan's activities to the broader conflict between Christianity and the Roman Empire's religious practices. Augustine of Hippo provided the most comprehensive and enduring account of Satan's relationship with humanity. In his works, including The City of God, Augustine identified pride as the root of both Satan's fall and human sin. He argued that Satan's rebellion against God set the pattern for human disobedience, and he linked Satan's role to the doctrine of original sin. Augustine emphasized that while Satan could tempt and deceive, he could not force humans to sin. Free will remained central to Augustine's theology, as he maintained that humans bore responsibility for their moral choices. However, he also highlighted the necessity of divine grace to overcome Satan's influence and achieve salvation. The existence of Satan raised profound questions about the nature of evil and its compatibility with a good and omnipotent God. Theologians addressed these issues through various approaches, one of which occurring through dualism versus monotheism. While early Christian thought was influenced by dualistic frameworks, such as those found in Gnosticism and Zoroastrianism, Orthodox theologians rejected the idea of two equal and opposing divine forces. Instead, they affirmed that Satan was a created being whose power was ultimately subordinate to God's sovereignty. Another approach was the testing of humanity. Many theologians, including Origen and Augustine, argued that Satan's role as a tempter served a divine purpose. By allowing Satan to test human beings, God provided opportunities for spiritual growth, moral choice, and the exercise of free will. A third approach perceived the ultimate defeat of Satan. The assurance of Satan's ultimate defeat was a recurring theme in early Christian theology. Revelation's depiction of Satan's final judgment reinforced the belief that his power was temporary and that God's victory was certain. This eschatological perspective provided hope and assurance to early Christians, particularly in the face of persecution. The refinement of Satan's identity by early theologians reflected a synthesis of biblical traditions, Jewish apocalyptic literature, and Greco-Roman philosophical concepts. This process was not without controversy, as debates about the nature of evil, the limits of Satan's power, and the scope of divine grace continued to shape Christian theology. By the end of this period, Satan was firmly established as the personification of evil and the adversary of God and humanity. This portrayal not only influenced Christian doctrine, but also shaped the cultural and artistic imagination of the medieval and modern worlds. The modern understanding of Satan, as developed through the centuries, builds upon the theological foundations laid by the early church fathers, and expands through cultural, philosophical, and literary influences. While rooted in theoretical, superstitious Christian tradition, the modern image of Satan reflects a diverse interplay of religious reinterpretations, secular philosophies, and artistic representations. From a literal fallen angel in conservative Christian circles to a symbol of human defiance in secular thought, Satan serves as a mirror reflecting humanity's evolving concerns about morality, authority, and the nature of evil. The Protestant Reformation of the 16th century significantly altered perceptions of Satan. The Reformers emphasized Satan's role in opposing the gospel and corrupting the church. Figures like Martin Luther and John Calvin framed Satan as a personal and institutional adversary. Martin Luther described Satan as an active presence in the lives of believers, seeking to undermine faith through temptation, despair, and heresy. He believed that Satan manipulated both the Catholic Church and the secular world to oppose true Christian doctrine. For Luther, the personal struggle against Satan was a defining aspect of faith. Prayer, scripture, and the sacraments were viewed as critical tools for resisting the devil's influence. John Calvin emphasized God's sovereignty, arguing that Satan operated only within the limits permitted by divine providence. He depicted Satan as a creature entirely subordinate to God, whose power, while supposedly real, served to test and refine believers. This period solidified Satan's role as a personal adversary and an enemy of ecclesiastical reform, influencing later Protestant and evangelical traditions. The Enlightenment of the 17th and 18th centuries brought a wave of skepticism towards supernatural phenomena, including the existence of Satan. Rationalist philosophers and theologians began to reinterpret Satan as a symbolic or allegorical figure rather than a literal being. Enlightenment thinkers often reduce Satan to a metaphor for human evil or ignorance. Rather than being a supernatural antagonist, Satan was recast as a representation of humanity's capacity for selfishness, pride, and destructiveness. Deists, who emphasized reason and the observation of nature as paths to understanding God, dismissed the idea of a personal devil. They viewed Satan as a relic of superstition incompatible with a rational and benevolent creator. These trends marked a departure from traditional Christian demonology, shifting the focus from cosmic battles to human moral responsibility. In the 19th century, the Romantic movement reimagined Satan as a symbol of individualism, rebellion, and defiance against tyranny. This reinterpretation was influenced by literary works and the broader cultural fascination with anti-heroes. Concerning John Milton's Lost Paradise, although written in the 17th century, Milton's epic poem had a profound impact on Romantic thought. Milton's Satan, while ultimately defeated, is portrayed as a complex and charismatic figure who defies divine authority. Lines like, "Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven," became emblematic of romantic ideals of independence and self-determination. William Blake, a romantic poet and artist, depicted Satan as a necessary counterpart to divine order, embodying creativity, energy, and resistance. His works blurred the line between good and evil, challenging traditional moral binaries. Percy Shelley's poem, Prometheus Unbound, drew parallels between the mythological figure of Prometheus and Milton's Satan, framing both as champions of freedom and challengers of authoritarian power. This romantic reinterpretation shifted Satan's image from a purely malevolent being to a symbol of human aspiration and resistance. The 20th and 21st centuries have seen Satan's role evolve further, influenced by modern literature, cinema, and cultural shifts. Satan has become a versatile figure, reflecting both traditional religious beliefs and secular, psychological, and philosophical ideals. Works like C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters present Satan and his demons as cunning manipulators, emphasizing the subtlety of spiritual warfare. Modern novels and stories, such as those by Stephen King, often depict Satan or satanic forces as embodiments of existential evil, exploring their impact on human lives and societies. Satanic imagery has been a staple of horror films, such as with The Exorcist and Apartment 7A. These portrayals often focus on themes of possession, sacrifice, corruption, and apocalyptic prophecy, blending traditional Christian demonology with contemporary fears. The modern Satanic Temple and similar groups have redefined Satan as a symbol of rationalism, secularism, and opposition to authoritarianism. These movements often reject belief in a literal devil, instead embracing Satan as a figure of rebellion and critique against religious dogma. Modern Christian theology continues to engage with the concept of Satan, balancing traditional beliefs with contemporary insights into psychology and morality. Many evangelical groups emphasize spiritual warfare, viewing Satan as an active and personal adversary. This perspective often involves prayer, exorcism, and deliverance ministry as defenses against demonic influences. Liberal theologians tend to interpret Satan symbolically, focusing on systemic evil and human sinfulness rather than a literal personal being. This approach aligns with modern ethical and social concerns, such as addressing inequality and injustice. The Catholic Church, despite its claims on emphasizing personal responsibility and transformation by grace, maintains its traditional belief in Satan as a fallen angel and a personal, active force of evil. At its core, Satan represents the human endeavor to make sense of the existence of evil in a world governed by a benevolent and omnipotent God. Early theologians such as Irenaeus, Tertullian, Origen, and Augustine grappled with the paradox of a good creator allowing the presence of a powerful adversary. Their efforts to define Satan as a created being, corrupted through pride and rebellion, underscored the Christian belief in free will and the ultimate triumph of divine grace. This duality of Satan as both a tempter of humanity and a defeated foe provided a framework for Christians to understand their moral struggles and the cosmic significance of Christ's redemptive work. The eventual apocalyptic defeat of Satan, vividly depicted in texts like Revelation, offered hope and assurance of God's ultimate sovereignty. Nevertheless, the figure of Satan, as explored in Christian theology, Jewish tradition, and pagan mythology, is a sure symbol of the human struggle. While these beliefs are often rooted in the mythologies of their respective cultures, the core truth transcends religious superstition. The battle between good and evil, light and darkness, exists fundamentally within the human being. This internal conflict, represented figuratively in the image of Satan, speaks to the universal condition of humanity, a constant tension between higher aspirations and destructive impulses. The allocation of this struggle to a symbolic adversary like Satan offers a lens through which individuals can comprehend their own inclinations towards selfishness, pride, and fear. However, to dwell solely on the mythological framework risks obscuring a deeper truth. The true adversary is not external, but resides within each of us. The personal and the devotional conscience, equipped with reason, empathy, and self-awareness, is both the battleground and the tool for transcending this conflict. To view Satan solely within the lens of mythology or superstition is to miss the point. Stop worshiping a theoretical idol, and let the concept serve as a mirror reflecting our potential for both creation and destruction, love and hatred. The adversary is real, not in the heavens, but within each of us. By embracing the struggle with conscious intention, we move beyond superstition into a reality where personal devotional transformation becomes the path to renewal.